Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome back to yet another video. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Nicole, and I'd like to come on here once a week to just share whatever messages I am feeling called to share with you who are on the journey of healing and awakening and just trying to really understand what on earth is going on in this world. So, today I had planned to pick some cards and just kind of let the cards guide me, but in the process of preparing for this reading, my plans changed totally and felt the urge, or guided rather, should I say, to really talk about trauma today because so few people understand how trauma is really at the root cause of everything that is going wrong in our lives individually as well as in our lives collectively. So, what do I mean about trauma? First of all, the word trauma comes with so much negative connotation. But we have to understand, first and foremost, is that we have all been traumatized. We have all experienced trauma in one way or another. Now, there are many different forms of trauma that exist, but most of the time when we say the word trauma, most people will think of some kind of horrific accident or some kind of horrific thing that has happened to somebody. So we have what I like to define as small t trauma and capital T trauma. So capital T trauma can be recognized as, for example, being in some kind of horrific car accident, having a really bad physical injury, having some kind of really horrific illness, those kinds of like really big traumas that we think about, losing a parent, losing a loved one, seeing something, really bloody and horrible happening in front of us, as opposed to small t trauma, which is actually the trauma that we have all experienced. So small t trauma can be sort of recognized as emotional trauma, mental trauma, having sort of like living with divorced parents, or living in a home whereby you are not well looked after mentally, or where you are abused emotionally, or where you are beaten, or maybe even sort of sexual abuse. So there are various different types of trauma. But now when we look at trauma in our adulthood versus trauma when we are children, because remember, when we look at something today and might be like, oh yeah, that's not such a big of a deal. So for example, bullying. And of course there are various degrees of bullying. But now if we talk about bullying in the context of, oh yeah, maybe once in a while people would tease you when you were a kid and maybe make fun of the color of the trousers you wore, or maybe you wore like, some funny jumpers and you would be made fun of because of that. And so when we look back to it now, it's like, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't such a big of a deal. But we have to remember that when we were children, our brains weren't fully developed. And so even just the way we dealt with things, the way we comprehended the world, the way we looked at the world would be very different when we were children to the way it is now, which is why, there are certain things that we can't talk about with children, and certain decisions that children shouldn't be making because of the fact that their brains aren't fully developed and they don't have the mental capacity to be able to make those kinds of decisions, or the mental capacity to deal with these difficult situations and challenging scenarios that they might have been exposed to. So something, for example, that might have been trauma as a child. So let's say you were sitting in your pram, you were maybe 1 year old, and you were crying, and you'd gone to the supermarket with your mum, and you're crying and your mum just doesn't understand why you're crying. And what you're trying to communicate to her is that you are too hot. But maybe your mum comes and she looks at you and she's trying to understand, and she's just not getting what you're trying to communicate with her path. That's trauma. And in that moment, why is that trauma? Is because that could have helped you, that could have led to you building a mechanism where you didn't know how to control your naturally control your heat regulation. So perhaps another thing that could have been traumatizing as a child is, you know, you did this beautiful drawing and you come home from school and you're trying to show your mom or your dad and you're like, oh, look at this cool drawing that I've done. And your mom ignores you because maybe there was some kind of emergency that was going on. Maybe, you know, food was burning in the oven and so she's not really paying attention to you. Paf, that's trauma. And that moment, that precise moment right there could have helped you or could have led to you developing a belief that your mother didn't care about your art, or your mother didn't care about you, or your mother cared more about the food than she cared about you. Because remember, the way in the first sort of 5 to 7 years of our lives, our brains are working in a totally different frequency. But not only that, what happens is that in those years of development, what happens is that everything is very egocentric, in that we think everything is about us because that is all we really understand as children. So something so simple could have actually been a trauma. Just the process of being birthed through our mother's birthing canal was traumatic. Can you imagine? You were sitting there in your warm, cozy amniotic fluid. It's nice and dark, it's nice and cozy, and then suddenly you're moving down this really tight, you know, canal where your face is being squished and it's really like, oh, just trying to get out of here. And then suddenly you're out in the world and there are all these bright lights and everyone is talking and you're being smacked on the bum because maybe you're not crying. I mean, how traumatic is that experience? We don't stop and really think about the traumatic and difficult and challenging experiences that we had throughout our lives. Just like think about the first time you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, the first love that you had. It was traumatic. And so why do we talk about trauma, and why is trauma so different for so many people? Because essentially what trauma is an overload of energy or an overload of information in your nervous system that you don't know how to process. You don't know how to deal with it, which is why, for example, somebody can experience a death in the family and they will go into some kind of catatonic state, whereas the other person will be going on as if, you know, it's business as usual. And why is that? Is because we all regulate through our nervous system in a very different way. So we have to understand that the way the world is set up, the way society is set up, the way the matrix system is set up, is to literally, we are all being traumatized. The schooling system is traumatic. You have to sit in your chair, you know, you're used to running around all the time, and then suddenly you're in school and you can't move around and you can't go to the toilet unless you ask this random stranger that you've never met, and there are all these other kids that are maybe making fun of you. Could be a super traumatic experience. So the thing is, what we have to understand is that every single person on this planet has some kind of trauma. Now, of course, there are various degrees of trauma. There are some people who have experienced really, 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 really negative things that are worse than maybe some other people, but it doesn't really matter what the trauma was. It was the fact that our nervous systems have been overloaded by energy and we don't know how to process it. And so as a result of these overloaded nervous systems, which essentially keeps our body stuck in fight or flight. Now think about this. When we get stuck in fight or flight, our body mentally and physically and even emotionally is not functioning the way it should be, because not only that, our heart starts to pump pretty fast, all of our blood is rushed to our extremities because we're getting ready to essentially run away. If we're getting ready to run away, we don't have time to think, you know, oxygenated blood is not making its way up to our head. So we literally can't think rationally. So most of humanity today is stuck in a state of survival. Most of humanity today is stuck in fight or flight. This is why most of us, for example, when we need to just sit back and relax and take it easy or just not do anything, we start to get anxiety. And why do we get anxiety? We start to get anxiety because the nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, literally telling us that we need to always be go, 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 go. And when our nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, our brain is also not thinking rationally, as I said, but another thing that activates this fight or flight mechanism is the thoughts that we hold. So if we are constantly thinking about all the negative things that are happening in our world, we are literally creating stresses. We are activating the stresses in our body, which is affecting our nervous system, but also our lymphatic system, which is controlled by our adrenal glands, which is why so many people get into burnout. It is because actually they are in adrenal fatigue, where the toxic buildup of all this stress that they are creating because of the thoughts that they are holding, which is generating negative emotions, is literally creating a negative cocktail of hormones in the body, which essentially starts to make us age, it starts to make us sick, it starts to make us really stiff, it starts to make us really tired, it affects our immune system, it affects our ability to see the world clearly, and essentially we start only seeing the world through the lens of all of these negative thoughts that begin to plague our existence. And all these negative thoughts that we are all stuck in essentially are the byproduct of the beliefs that were created as a result of these traumatic, negative, and challenging experiences that we had as children, as teenagers, as adults, and so on and so forth. So most of the beliefs that we are all carrying around today are beliefs that were built on a traumatized mindset, where we were building these beliefs. And remember, our beliefs will also affect our thoughts, but most importantly will affect our actions. And so what is happening in the world today? Why is there so much chaos? Why are so many people experiencing challenges? Why do so many people feel like nothing is working? Why is everyone just kind of stuck in this loop of frustration? And yes, one of the reasons is because there's so much crazy shit happening in the world. But why is all this crazy shit happening in the world? It is a reflection of what is happening within each of the 8 to 9 billion people who are living on this planet. So remember, the reason why this matrix system exists, the way the system in which the world in which we live exists within the system in which it exists, is because of all of the beliefs and the programs that have been programmed into us as a result of our experiences, but also the programming from our parents, the programming from the schooling system, the programming from TV, the programming from everything in society, which is cultivating the beliefs that we hold. So because most of these beliefs are built on traumatized minds, we have been building beliefs that are not the reality of the world. They're false beliefs, essentially. And most of us today can literally say that we do not love ourselves, that we do not think that we are good enough, that we do not think that we are worthy, that we do not think that it has what it takes. And these beliefs are constantly being reinforced by the advertising industry, by marketing, by basically every industry, which is telling you, oh, the only way you're going to be happy is if you buy all of these things. And you need these things because you possibly can't be good enough as you currently are without any of these things. So you can see how the cycle just continues to perpetuate. But so now trauma, the thing is, so for those of us who experienced now really negative trauma, so well, obviously all trauma is negative, but what I'm trying to say is those people who have experienced really high levels of trauma in the form of all the different types of abuse. And remember, abusing an adult is going to have very different side effects to when you abuse a child. So children, and so this really makes me think of, like, here in Kenya, when you think about all the children that were beaten by their teachers because they weren't performing or they were talking too much or whatever it was, just maybe because the teacher was in a bad mood, all these children that got beaten, you can imagine how that has affected the way they show up in the world today, even as adults. It's like, this is why you find so many people who lie. It's because they were so scared that they would say the wrong thing that they would get beaten, and they unconsciously carry these programs into adulthood, where they'll unconsciously lie because they don't want to get in trouble, because they're still stuck in their same mindset that they were when they were children. And so right now, all of these when we don't heal our trauma, when all of that negative energy that is sitting within us, all that negative energy that has been sitting in our nervous system, that is constantly activating the fight or flight mechanism, because now our mind is stuck in a negative space, which is then also influencing our immune system, making us sick. And of course, when you are sick and you don't feel good in your body, you're not going to be you're not necessarily going to be a very positive person and look for the good things that are happening in the world. You're going to be stuck at only being able to see the negative shit, because you are there feeling negative within your body. And so what happens is that when we are feeling negative and not good in our body, so think about it this way: when you're really sick and you're not feeling good because maybe you were fired from your job, and maybe you're really worried about how you're going to pay for your bills, when you see happy people around you, that's not going to make you happy. That's actually just going to make you pissed off, because you're just going to be like, why are these people happy? There are so many bitter people in this world. And why are there bitter people in this world? There are bitter people in this world because they are unconsciously still carrying around all of these negative emotions and thoughts and energies in their body that have been sitting with them from the time that they experienced a challenging or traumatic experience or event. And so as a result of all of that concoction of stuff, we then start turning into negative people. So the people who have experienced really negative, let's focus on the children. So children that have experienced a really, really, really difficult upbringing, what will happen is that generally they will, if they don't get help and support as their children, what will happen is they will start developing really negative traits. And they might turn into abusers, or they might turn into, I don't know, petty thieves, or they might turn out to be really narcissistic, or they might turn out to be very rude, or they might, all these traits that we're like, oh, this is a shitty person. All these negative traits that human beings have is actually a side effect of trauma that they have experienced and they weren't able to heal. And this is why right now, what is happening now, there's so much crazy shit happening, because where we are being pushed to is that essentially the universe wants every single one of us human beings on this planet to heal our shit, to heal all the negative traumas, and as a result of that, all the negative side effects, the coping mechanisms, the personality traits, the physiological issues that are happening in our body, which are essentially turning us into people who we were never meant to be. People who experience trauma become bitter people. And that's not to say that everyone who has been traumatized becomes a bitter person, but people who have been traumatized, who don't heal that trauma, will become bitter people, or angry people, or obese people, or whatever. All the things that we see as bad or wrong in society are actually the side effects of people who have experienced trauma. And so when we understand that, we start to understand why human beings behave the way they do. They do because they have had difficult and challenging situations in their lives. And if you don't know how to deal with that, because, if you are someone who's experienced a lot of trauma in your life, and from the very beginning of your life, you were told you are wrong, you are pathetic, you are useless, you are unlovable, and this was not said to you in so many words, but this was understood by the actions of the people who were supposedly raising you when you were a child. And so you can see how that would go and distort the way you look at the world, the way you perceive the world, the way you show up in the world, the way you behave, and so on and so forth. And so really, all of the negative shit that is happening in the world has come to be the way it is because this world has been developed by traumatized people. Essentially, the people who live and, who kind of live at the higher echelons of society and who are controlling everything in the world are people who have totally lost the plot. The people who have created the world to be the way it is today, because all of this has been geoengineered. And the thing is, every single one of us human beings has has supported the development of the system, because we have been traumatized by the system, and as a result turn into also crazy people, narcissistic people. And as I've said in many of my previous videos, hurt people hurt people. And so why, when we question, oh, why do I treat that person badly, why did I overreact when this person said this or this, why do I drink so much, why do I feel the need to take drugs, why do I feel the need to always be on my phone, why do I feel the need to eat so much processed food, or whatever it may be, all these addictions that we hold, these are coping mechanisms as a result of difficult and challenging things that happen to us throughout our life, whether we were children all the way into adulthood. And so what is happening in the world today, all of these challenges that we are facing are really, the boat is being rocked on an individual level as well as a collective level to help us see the aspects of ourselves that need healing, the aspects of ourselves, the shadow aspects of ourselves, because there are the things that we do consciously and then there are the things that we do unconsciously. You can sometimes have an argument with a friend or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever it may be, a parent, a child, where you will say to the person, oh, you did this, and the person will be like, no, I didn't, because what they have done is they have fully masked that part of themselves. They're like, oh, this is so uncomfortable to look at that I'm going to pretend that this part of me doesn't exist at all. And that is essentially what we call the shadow self, the part that the aspects of ourselves that do things that are not necessarily accepted by society and that are not seen as good traits, that we do as a result of a coping mechanism, as a result of trauma and difficult experiences that we've had throughout our lives. And so we're all just a bunch of traumatized people that are needing to be loved and needing to be accepted and needing to be healed and needing to comprehend that we are good enough. And we develop these beliefs that, especially if our parents or our primary caregivers when we were children were not good to us and did not treat us well and did all kinds of horrific things to us, well, what happens is we start believing, well, if my parents weren't able to love me and accept me and treat me well, then why would some random stranger that I've never met before? And so this is the whole mechanism as to why we need to heal, because we are all unconsciously allowing this negative system to continue to exist because we uphold it by our shadow aspects, the shadow parts of our beings that we don't want to look at and want to pretend that don't exist. But it is those parts of ourselves that are unconsciously allowing this negative system to continue to exist. Now, I hope that this is making sense. I know that I'm jumping around a lot here, but it is important for people to understand the mechanism as to how trauma affects us on a mental level, on an emotional level, and even on a spiritual level, also a physical level, because it affects our health. And so this is why we talk about the awakening journey, because the awakening journey essentially is what? It is awakening to the parts of ourselves that we have hidden because they have been too uncomfortable to look at, because they take us back into our traumatized moments. They make us remember about all these traumatic and really uncomfortable situations that we had to live through. But we have to understand that in no way was it our fault that we experienced trauma. It was in no way our fault. Nobody on this planet, no matter how horrific they are, no child especially deserves to experience any kind of abuse in any form. None whatsoever. So when we then, because of how the trauma might have occurred, we might start to believe, oh, this was my fault. And that's what happens, is when you have been very traumatized, you start to look at yourself in the completely wrong way. You start to only see the bad. You can no longer see the good that exists within you. And so we really are at a point where the universe is manifesting all kinds of challenging situations in our lives that are forcing us to stop, because the way that the coping mechanisms that allowed us to continue moving forward, maybe they worked back then, but because the energies of the planet, the energies of the cosmos are changing, and as a result, so are we. Those coping mechanisms that worked back then can no longer work now, because we can no longer continue to move forward as hurt and traumatized people. The universe essentially wants us as a collective, as individuals, to only move forward as healed and whole people, because hurt people hurt people. And we do this on an unconscious level. How many times did you maybe get into an argument with a friend or a lover or a family member, and you say something only for 1 second later to totally regret what you said and be like, I don't know why I said that, that was so hurtful? Because hurt people want to hurt other people so that they are brought down to this lower sense of vibration, to this lower emotional state, so that, because misery loves company. So if I am hurt, I want to be with hurt people, because when I am hurt and people are being happy around me, that is triggering me, because it's those hurt parts of me are like, why would anyone be happy? Because there is no happiness or joy within me. And so this is why we are all being called to awaken to the parts of ourselves that are not good, which are essentially coping mechanisms for traumatic experiences that we had throughout our life or at some point in our life. And so those parts of us uphold this negative system, because we all question, you know, when you hear about all these things that are coming out. And I posted the other day on TikTok to say that what is happening now also is that we are being strengthened to be able to receive the truth of the world around us, because the world that is presented to us at face value is totally not the reality of the world in which we live. What is actually holding up this system, the foundation of this system in which we live, is built on pain and trauma and on darkness and on a very low vibrational energy, which is, I think we can all look at the world today and we can see that this system does not celebrate people who are loyal and just and caring and empathetic and all of those things. This system seems to put those on a pedestal, the people who are unjust and who will take things away but from people by force, and who are not kind and who are not caring. And so we can see that the world is totally inverted. But we have unconsciously been allowing the system to continue to exist, because we unconsciously support the system. We feed this system with our energy by buying things from this system. You know, if we all stopped buying shitty products from corporations, they would have to stop making them. But because we accept, we don't go beyond face value. You know, when I look at beauty products, for example, and you read all the stuff that is in these products, it's just like, why would you want to put these things on your body? But because we have given our power away, because we have been traumatized so much and been made to believe that we hold no worth, that we hold no value, that we couldn't possibly know anything, that we need to give our powers away because we are incapable of doing things for ourselves. So as a result of that, we give all of our power away to these corporations, these organizations, these systems that pretend to have our best intention at heart, but really they're taking advantage of the fact that we think that we are worthless. So why should we possibly, why, if we think we're worthless, we don't believe that these corporations, organizations, systems could possibly listen to anything that we have to say. And so right now, while everyone is out there protesting and saying, oh no, really, the number one thing that we should be doing is not complying to this system. We need to take our power back. We need to realize that the only way that we can actually build our value is by healing our trauma, is by looking to the parts of ourselves and questioning, what is it that is going on within me, and why is it that I do these things? All those uncomfortable things, those addictions, those negative personality traits, those negative behaviors. The question is, why do I do these things? Why do I do all of these things. And the thing is, once we start to question, then they're no longer unconscious. Now we have the ability to see the things that we're doing unconsciously, the things that we're doing when we're in autopilot mode, because what happens is we have disassociated. Because when we experience challenging and difficult experiences, especially when we were children, what happens is we disassociate. We leave our body because what is happening to us is too painful or too difficult for us to experience. So it's like you literally just vacate the premises. And this is where we talk about the creation of alter egos. We create, because when you disassociate, essentially you fragment, you create an altar. Normally the altar upon which your consciousness sits within your body, you leave your body. So, and therefore vacating the seat upon which you sit, allowing something else to come and sit upon that throne. And so this is where now we can start talking about parasites and how so many people are no longer operating through their own free will and volition, but are actually being controlled by parasitic energies that exist and that are coming into our bodies from the foods that we eat, the products we consume, the beauty products, whatever, from the content that we are consuming, because that is also planting certain seeds in our mind that begin to grow. And as we are pulled down in vibrational frequency into these lower states, so for example, when we're in depression, we can't think positively because there is something that is keeping us stuck in that lower vibrational frequency, in that lower and energetic or emotional state, which doesn't allow us to see positivity. And that is parasitic energies which are continuing to manifest because of all the things that we are consuming in all its different forms. And so one of the first ways to begin changing and to really start embarking on this healing journey, as I have mentioned many, many times before, is taking charge of our health, making sure that we are consuming live foods as opposed to dead ones. So that means not eating foods that are processed, only consuming foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, things that are going to elevate us in our frequency, not taking so many tablets, and maybe using herbs rather, in surrounding ourselves with people who see our value as opposed to telling us constantly that we're not good enough. So, making sure that we're in a job that makes us feel good about ourselves, that make us feel good to what we're contributing to the world. So all of these challenges that we are experiencing right now is forcing us to look at the parts of ourselves that have been traumatized and to heal those parts of ourselves so that we are no longer operating from these unconscious coping mechanisms, which are not really who we are, but a false self that has been created as a form of protection because of all those negative things that we were experiencing. So I really hope that this is making sense. I know that it can be really, really confusing to try and break some of these things down, but it is really to explain that every single person on this planet really needs healing in one form or another. Because if you are carrying any kind of resentment or anger, or not feeling good about yourself, not feeling fulfilled in your life, not feeling fulfilled within yourself, if you can't stand in front of the mirror and say, I absolutely love myself and I absolutely love my life, then that is an indication that there is healing that is needed. And the healing doesn't need to be difficult, because really the number one part of healing is about learning to give yourself love and compassion. It is about nurturing yourself, because if you were traumatized, especially as a child, then essentially what you are needing now as an adult, because it means your inner child is still wounded, and you as the adult now has to essentially learn how to mother or father or how to parent your inner child. Become the parent that you wished you had at that time. So even if you don't have children, but this is even more important if you do have children, because you are unconsciously passing on those negative traits to your children. It's crazy how so many times parents will look at their children and be like, oh my gosh, my child does all these negative things. Well, You, as the parent, are the source of all of those negative things, because children pick up what is within our energy. Children are so much more intelligent than we give them credit for, and they will pick up not so much from the things that we say, but from our actions. So that again comes back to those unconscious coping mechanisms that we do, that we don't know that we're doing, but our children are picking up on. And so we really just need to learn more love, compassion, support, nurturing. So it's about starting to ask yourself, how can you do that more for yourself? How can you be more kind to yourself? Well, it first starts off with having more kind and loving conversations with yourselves. You know, most people, if they stop to think about the majority of the thoughts that they're having, they tend to be more negative than they are positive. So you can already start to change the language that you have within yourself. Start seeing the more positive aspects of yourselves than always looking for the negative aspects. Because otherwise, we're just going round and round in circles, wondering why we're unhappy, wondering why we're not getting to where it is that we wish to be. It's because of all of those unconscious coping mechanisms that are actually unconsciously self-sabotaging us from moving forward. So really start to question, what is it in your world that you are unconsciously trying to walk away from, trying to ignore, trying not to see, trying not to recognize within yourself. So let's just pick a few cards here to see what messages of guidance. Oh, that's maybe a bit too many here. So beautiful messages here. So we have first card, Sisterhood of the Rose, beauty and devotion, priestess, mystic, teacher. Yes, you are part of the Sisterhood of the Rose. You are part of the collective that was sent here to awaken before the majority of the collective, so that you would be able to help the rest of the collective on their awakening journey. Because the more people awaken, the more they are going to need people who can help them on this journey. And, you know, not to shit on psychologists and psychotherapists and all of that kind of stuff, but clearly we are seeing a mental health epidemic that is happening now, and clearly those previous methods are not working, because we wouldn't have so many traumatized people today. We would have, I mean, there is a lot of awakening, and this is not to say that psychologists are not doing a good job, but we are obviously within the field of psychology. There is a lot more information that is coming to light today also, that is helping us to understand that there are different methodologies and techniques and ways of how we can deal our trauma. Because I'm sorry, I don't believe that talk-based therapy is the way to go. You know, constantly talking about all the shit that you've been through is not going to heal you. The number one thing is learning to see that you were not the problem, and that you are no way at fault, and that you are worthy. You are worthy of love. But first of all, you need to learn to love yourself. The next card we have, don't dim to fit in. How are you dimming your light in order to fit in? Yes, how many of us suppress who we really are because we try to fit into society? Well, I'm sorry to say, the society, the system in which we live is really fucking boring, because we're all made to you know, we're taught that, oh, unless you fit into all these neat little boxes, there is something wrong with you. This society does not celebrate individualism and creativity and uniqueness. It's like everyone has to dress the same, look the same, behave the same, speak the same, otherwise there's something wrong with you. No, this is the false information that we have been sold, because we came here to really open up and experience who we truly are. But most of us feel unhappy and lost because we are living behind the mask of this trauma and all these unconscious coping mechanisms who are really not representative of who we really are. So where are you dimming to fit in? The next card we have is, yes, the initiation, rite of passage, crossing the threshold. Yes, we are all being pushed into this dark cave, and it is only once we go through the darkness that we will start to emerge and see that there is light on the other side. But we can only really start to see the treasures once we go in, because the only way is through. We can't, there's no bypassing. There are so many people who are trying to spiritually bypass, and this is why people keep hitting a wall and are not going anywhere. It's because the universe is telling you this is not the way you need to go. You need to change something. This thing is not working because this is not the way it's meant to be. This is not the way for you. This is not, this system no longer works. Perhaps it worked in the past, but this is not the way that you can continue moving forward. Something needs to shift, something needs to change. So let us close this video out with some final messages of guidance from the Divine Energy Oracle. Let's see what messages we have to end here. So 3 cards. We have be decisive. Yes. You know, how many people make a decision and then they'll talk to people about it and then they'll start to doubt. When you make a decision, this is why we are really being pushed to follow our intuition. Because first of all, you have to remember your intuition will never lead you astray. Your intuition is like your spiritual guide. It is there to protect you, and it is there to guide you in the right direction. So now it is no longer thinking from a mind-based place, but from a heart-based place. And remember, when we think from our heart, we are more connected to our intuition. So follow the call of your intuition. If your heart, if your spirit, if your head is telling you to move in a certain direction, and if it feels really right, you know, take the time to really feel into your heart. Does this feel right for me? Be decisive and stick to it. Stop being wishy-washy. One minute you're doing this and then you're like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. This is why so many people fail. It is because they cannot stick to their words. If you say, you know, for me, it baffles me how so many people say that they're going to do something and then they don't do it. Say that you're going to do it, be decisive, do it, and stick to it. The next card we have is go with the flow. So yes, be decisive and go with the flow. I guess that can be seen as a little bit counterproductive, but it is about going with the flow of your heart, going with the flow of your spirit, listening to the message of guidance that you are receiving from your spirit and your heart. And last of all, express your joy. Yes, as we're coming closer to the end of the year, you know, you can really start to think. Remember, 2025 is a 9 year. It is a year of completion. We are completing a cycle. So let next year be the year in which you are going to fully express your joy. So now is a good time, as we prepare for the end of the year, is start really thinking about what is it that brings you joy? How is it that you will be able to express your joy? Because so many of us, we dim our joy to fit in. So how can you do the things that make you happy? How can you do the things that elevate you? Or what do you need to get rid of in order to be able to express your joy? So I really hope that these messages have been helpful. I would love to hear from you in the comments. What is going on with you? Are you resonating with these messages? What challenges are you experiencing? Perhaps you want to share some of the things that you would like to do in order to express your joy, or some of the things you need to get rid of in order to do so. So I ask that you please share this message with whoever you think might benefit from it, and to like the video so that it can reach more people. I'm sending you so much love. I wish you strength on your journey. I wish you strength on this journey of healing, especially because I know that it is not an easy one. But for telling you, someone who was stuck in this cave for a long time and has been on this healing journey, I can promise you that once you get through those really, really dark moments, there is nothing but joy on the other side of it. So I'm sending you much love, much strength, and I'll see you in next week's video. Bye for now.